Canada's premiers are pushing back against the federal government's 2024 budget. They say Ottawa did a poor job of consulting them before tabling it. Nova Scotia Premier Tim Houston wrote a letter to the Prime Minister on behalf of all the premiers. In it, Houston writes, the federal government must refrain from overreaching into provincial and territorial jurisdiction, particularly in the areas of health, education, and housing. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said today that Ottawa will work with all orders of government to make life easier for Canadians.
I don't think Canadians are well served when orders of government are fighting with each other. I think it works best as a country when we're looking to collaborate. We're looking to work together in ambitious ways to create housing, to support universities, to support citizens.
For more on this provincial pushback to the federal budget, New Brunswick Premier Blaine Higgs joins me now. Premier, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, David. Nice to be here.
I've read the letter you've all signed. It's a forceful but polite letter, but you have very bluntly said this budget is absolutely shocking and totally out of control, which is even more blunt. What's so shocking about this plan from the federal government?
Well, it's a never-ending spending platform that we've seen now for the last 10 years. And, you know, the affordability in the country that was promised 10 years ago for homes being affordable is certainly, it hasn't changed. It's gotten worse, hasn't improved. But as concerning is the level of debt that the country's taken on, the level of exposure. We talk about a budget that was going to help people, you know, in the 10 to 30-year-old or 20 and 30-year-old range. But what's the future outlook in a country that continues to grow its deficit and continues to grow its debt? I'm very concerned about the long-term view of our country, and we know productivity is an issue, but now financially we're putting our country at risk.
Well, the debt is high. There's no question about it, and the debt servicing costs are growing. But a lot of that debt was debt they took on during the pandemic because provinces couldn't necessarily shoulder that burden. Now they're trying to catch up with some of the problems created by COVID, and there's $52.9 billion in new spending there over the next 5 years, targeted a lot of things like housing. But you don't think they should be doing that, even though that's one of the big issues right now?
Well, certainly housing is a big issue, David, but there's only so many houses you can build with the capability we have in the provinces. So, you know, it's a great headline to say we're going to put more money in and put strings around it so provinces will have to abide by these rules. But, you know, we've got about 5,500 new starts in the province. And yes, if it should be, you know, we can use the money to go into the province, and that's a good thing. But we only have a certain capability of what we can actually build. And that's a nuance to it all. So is there anything here that's going to actually make it cheaper and more affordable for people to live in their country or in our province? And I would say no. And the policies on energy have driven up the cost of everyday living, which in turn have driven up the cost of everyday supplies. So it's kind of a hollow argument that is targeted on a certain audience. You know, I would say for political reasons.
Well, there's money there for scaling up modular housing, so you can be building, you know, components for homes in the winter season when it's tough to do the construction outside. This is something the Home Builders Association will say, more factory-based construction of components that over time will really boost productivity and scale and deal with some of the labor gaps that you're dealing with, especially the seasonal ones. I mean, there are efforts there that could pay off in a few years.
Well, we have, you know, a $500 million housing program here in New Brunswick, and we have contracts with our modular home manufacturers, of which we have a number of them, 6, 7 of them in our province. And so we are going down the road and have been for some time. But so it becomes, again, what's the capability to do even more? And I guess if I was, you know, had a young family and you know, in that situation every day, I would look at how is it going to be cheaper for me to live every day in my community, to work and drive to work and to buy groceries. And I would say, what in this budget has helped that? Well, and I would say very little.
Right, but on the question of housing, I mean, for the past year, we've watched premiers, you know, and federal opposition leaders say the federal government has done nothing on housing. It needs to do more on housing. And now that it's doing things on housing, it's being criticized for jurisdiction and spending too much. I mean, what's the balance here, Premier, if this sudden urge and focus on this issue isn't the right approach here?
Well, the sudden urge and focus is, I would say, certainly one that is politically driven, but driven because of the concern about not having enough homes. But if you say, what can be done through this? So yes, can we build more in each province? If we can, then more money can help in that regard. but what are the issues that are going to help us? So if you look at the number of homes we need versus the population growth every province has had. So how do the two match up, and where do we need to get controls on that situation so that we can actually manage the growth of our country and our provinces going forward and build what's required? Are there other issues that the federal government should be focused on, in today's world, and I guess international trade conditions, our national security? There's a lot of things. And then the other aspect of economic growth, the only project that they talked about with economic growth was the pipeline that they invested in and paid 6 times more than they should have for it. So where's the economic growth in our country that's going to compete with other countries? And what's going to drive our economy, and where are we going to have the jobs going forward to be competitive? I mean, there's so much more that a federal government needs to look at on a national basis. And housing is only one component.
Right, but Kevin Lee from the Canadian Home Builders Association, they rolled out these housing announcements over a series of weeks, as I'm sure you're well aware. He said some of the changes for mortgage amortizations for new buyers could potentially unlock up to 34,000 new units being built right away, just because it creates that kind of demand, as long as they can get the approvals at the municipal level to do these things. The GST cut on apartment construction led to a boom in purpose-built apartment rentals last fall. I mean, this is economic activity. This is housing stock being increased by these policies. Is it all a failure in your view?
No, I guess my point would be, and so the GST change, I mean, we didn't all do that in the country. I met with developers in that process, and what new homes were going to be built based on the change in that regard. Were tenants going to see a cheaper rent at the end of the day? And I didn't get those commitments. And so then when you look at, no, they're not all failures. I'm not suggesting that, but I'm saying there is a capacity issue, and there is also an autonomy issue where we're saying, let us work with municipalities, which is the order of government, federal, provincial, and municipal. But the federal government has decided to go direct to the municipalities. And so at the end of the day, is there a joint commitment here that they're expecting from provinces, or is it going to be a competition? And we've worked well with municipalities in our own housing program, and we would like to continue to do that in a productive way, and with the federal government in the process, and not try to short circuit the system.
Look, there's no question there's a capacity issue, and the labor supply is going to be the constraint, if there is one, on any ambitious plan to build housing at the scale the country needs by about 2030. But with the money they're bringing directly to municipalities, there's nothing I've seen in any of the language around the announcements that they're counting on provincial governments to match it. All they want from provincial governments, it seems, certainly on the infrastructure money that was put in this budget, the $6 billion, is zoning changes, broadly across your jurisdictions. And you're a first minister facing an election this year. If you were being yelled at by people to put money into something, you'd want to put it in a way that gets the results that you need, wouldn't you? I mean, that's what they're trying to do here. The politics of it seems pretty clear.
Well, the politics seems clear, but the timing is not so clear. The details are not so clear. And how much impact it will have this year over what we're already doing, because every province is building, essentially to capacity. So I think that yes, it sounds good. It looks like we're going to have more houses delivered. But what is real clear, David, in terms of if all of a sudden we were paying 20 cents less a liter on fuel, that would be a clear differential. That would make a big difference in everyday's lives, and subsequently roll into costs of other commodities being reduced. I guess what's going to have the greatest impact, and I know it's a challenge. We all face it, but everyone that is paying more every day for what they do is a huge affordability issue, and housing is one component. There are many other components, but we will work with the federal government as much as we can to work as fast as we can.
Yeah, I think the housing, they view it more as a generational fairness issue and an affordability issue kind of lumped together. But you mentioned the price of fuel. And I know you've all been pushing for the meeting with the Prime Minister to try to get him to change his carbon policy and his carbon tax. It went up by 3.3 cents a litre on April 1, and everybody wanted a meeting about that. Why were the premiers so silent when the oil companies raised the price of fuel this week by like 12 cents a litre in a lot of places? Because they were moving over to summer gas. I mean, this is something corporations are doing. That's 4 years of carbon tax overnight, and it's all driven by the industry.
Well, it's driven by the summer regulations and the vapor pressure requirements and restrictions on summer fuel. So that is not a new thing. It happens every spring and it changes every fall. So it costs more to refine product for summer regulations. And that's where it comes from. So it's not, along with the market volatility that we've seen, over the years, that is a seasonal thing that happens, and it's not a new thing. But I guess you look at, okay, what is part of it? Is there another opportunity to get cheaper fuel in some way? And maybe, but regulations on just for the sake of regulations, or addition on a carbon tax, which are saying, is this really doing anything but other than just costing more? And David, I've proposed an opportunity for us to really affect emissions in the world and really drive down emissions by shutting down coal plants and converting to natural gas and doing what other countries are doing. I mean, it's kind of ironic that China has 1,100 coal plants, building, let's say, 1 to 2 a week. And then we'll say, well, they're supplying cheap batteries to us, so they have cheap manufacturing. Well, of course they do. They have a climate conditions that aren't even considering world emissions. And here we are consuming products at record amounts. And in the meantime, driving affordability up in our own country and driving a situation where competitiveness is almost a far reach. The whole philosophy is just not focused on the big picture. It's focused on the little bubble of, let's say, selective and individual provinces.